And does anybody know why we're here? Why are we here today? Anybody knows? Okay. I hope I have something to do. So this is the CIFM group. Which group is this? Certified International One-Eye Risk Managers. Yes, indeed. Just want to make sure you're in the right room, you know why you're here, and all that kind of stuff. Which module are we doing? Module number 5, yes indeed. How many modules have you done so far? How many modules do you have all together? 6. Alright, well, that's okay. Don't worry about it. Just take one module at a time. I remember a million years ago when I was in undergrad school, I thought I would never ever finish. I would be an old man before I got through. And then finally I got through. When I went to grad school, I'm thinking, why am I doing grad school? Why am I spending all of my money, getting nothing in return? I'm never going to finish. And then finally that was a million years ago already. So don't worry about it. Alright, a little bit about myself before we begin. I am a private banker. Hopefully I can say something that makes sense to you. This is not going to be a formal session, nor will the other sessions with me. It'll be a learning session hopefully, but not formal. Like if you want to have coffee, you can have coffee. If you want to bring breakfast and eat, unless your colleagues protest, please feel free. I don't have a problem with that, as long as you're picking up some of the stuff that I'm going to try and throw out. How many Saturdays do you have to be with me? Does anybody know? 4. 3 or 4? 3. Yeah, it was 4, I understand. But I think it's 3 now. 2 hours or 3 hours? 2 hours. Okay. Everybody's on the same page. It's called housekeeping. Alright, any questions before I kick in? If you think of any questions along the way, feel free. Remember, it's an open session. The problem with technology, you always need to have a what? Backup plan. Definitely. These things stop working whenever you feel like it. Alright. Just waiting for this sheet so I can see what I'm shouting at for the next couple of minutes. Feel free to shout back. While we wait for that sheet, does anybody know what a principle is? From your experience? A standard, okay. Principle is a standard. Usually it's a standard that does not come from the law. It's a standard that tends to be moral to a great extent in terms of what is right and what is wrong, versus a rule which is normally what? Created by man. Oftentimes statutory to tell us what to do. Go up 10 paces, turn left, make 3 paces. Loose your belt, put it back on. Wait until somebody tells you to move. When they tell you to move, move. Don't move before they tell you to move. If a truck is coming, don't move until they tell you to move. If they don't tell you to move, let the truck hit you. That's a rule. Principle says, you can don't move on it, but if a truck is coming, what are you going to do? it makes sense to get the hell out of the way. So, kind of like that. And so that's what we'll be talking about for the next couple of weeks. Good morning. To see how rules and principles work in a regulated and compliance environment. Can you just fill it in for me? It's conspicuously obvious. I seem to be the only male in this class. Is that true? I have company? How much company? She said one, it's fine. Yeah, the usual ratio these days. Where are we anyway? Where are we? We meaning man. What are we doing?
They need your help.
Yeah. Where are? Oh man, yeah. Where are we? We need help. Where the hell did we go? Okay. So module 5 then talks about regulations and compliance risks. Compliance has to do with what? Anybody? When we're told to be compliant, what are we being told to do? Follow the rules. Usually are stipulated by some government entity. Yes. Oh, yeah, just fill that in for me, please. Morning. You tell me you're the only,
What do you say?
you're the only guy in the room.
The only guy in the room.
Oh my God. Are you single or married?
Married.
This is my buddy. Yeah, you are. Yeah. The only other guy is married. That's the. Well, I tell you what, it's crazy. Alright, so what are we going to be looking at for today? Hopefully we can get through all of this stuff today. But it's okay because we have 2 other sessions and have some other things to say. The slide copies that you got today is only for today. Next week you'll get some other stuff or some other things we'll be talking about, especially with regards to the issue of corporate governance, conflicts of interest, things like that. But today we just want to talk about principles and risks, because that is going to set the foundation for all of the other little bits and pieces we're going to talk about. So first of all, we're going to talk about the summary of what's important in the slides we're going to talk about. Anybody ever heard about this? Sarbanes-Oxley Act? Yes. Yeah, absolutely. We'll see a little bit about that. It's kind of a regulatory act designed to govern some people after some tragedies occurred in the financial world. And then we're going to look at the UK FSS. What does an FSS mean? Anybody know? Yeah, the Financial Services Act, UK. And then some introductions to some interesting stuff. Then we're going to talk a little bit about the rules-based approach. Then the principles-based approach, some interesting paradoxes. And by the way, paradoxes refer to things that are sometimes not true, appear to be true, turns out to be true. It's a paradox. And you'll see that, and then some concluding remarks. Of course, if we don't get through all of it today, we won't panic. We'll just finish it next week, and then move on to the next issue. All right, feel free to jump in at any time, shout anything, tell us anything that's happened, any horror stories, tell us, because we can also learn from each other. So if I say something that prompts an experience, you don't have to call anybody's name. Something dealing with compliance that you're uncomfortable with, but you want some feedback, throw it out. Maybe I can throw something back. Maybe a colleague can throw something back. Somebody who's had experience can throw something back without using anybody's name. Because we know in the Bahamas we're getting like the Americans now. We are suing for defamation.
Everyone.
Morning, good morning. All right. Now this is an interesting little picture. I wonder why are any females in this picture? I wonder why you have two guys. Can you read this? It says, these new regulations will fundamentally change the way in which we get around them. In other words, wherever there's a rules-based system, people are always looking for a way where? Around. Everybody feel? Have everybody's name? Fantastic. Do you find it to be true? Wherever there are rules. Give your kids rules, they're going to find a way around it. Give organizations rules, we're going to find a way around it.
That explains where the guys are.
Maybe that's why only guys in this picture. Because we're always looking for a way around it. Does that mean that girls are not unethical? That girls are all ethical?
They're just smart about it.
Smarter. Interesting she should say that, because on my way here, they were singing an old Bahamian song that women are smarter. Okay? And the thing, which is, women are smarter. Because guys are pretty clumsy anyway, we're lousy liars. We don't understand why when we start to lie, our women can look in our face, you're lying! I should figure that. But when our women are lying, we can't figure it out, we're like this. Oh. Well, she go back with it. Okay. That's sick. Oh. So, yeah. So these two guys are trying to find a way around the rules, and guys tend to do that. And since now a lot of our women are taking over these rules-based areas, it is hoped that they'll be a little more ethical. But ethical is not gender connected anyway. That's the beautiful thing about it. If you're unethical, it doesn't matter whether you're male or female, it's the same. It's gender blind. It's one of the things that's gender blind, and that's a good thing. But these guys are looking for a way around. Okay. Let me just see who I'm talking to. Something stops. Jana. Okay, that's a J. Okay. Thank you, Jana. Fidelity Bank, yes. The bank across the way. Okay. Do you guys have any corporate governance in that bank? Yes, doggone it, we do. Any rules and regulations?
Yes.
A lot, by the way. Try and open up an account, see what happens. Bring this, bring that, bring your parents. But I'm 60, bring your parents anyway. They're dead, bring the death certificate. Okay, Jana Stubbs. Somebody major. Janae. Where's Janae? Yes, right over there. Okay, let's see again. Okay, Esther Johnson. Over there. Trust. Alright. Farida. How do you pronounce that? Farida. Okay. That story about UBS is still true.
Which story?
Oh, I know, that's she should be a lawyer, shouldn't she? I asked her one question, she asked me which one. The one that was published a few days ago in the local newspaper. Yes. So that she's not confirming the details. If I want details, I have to raise what? Further questions. Yes, indeed. Oh yes, the typical the 21st century banker, we have to be that way. Because things have changed. Okay, Shanice. Shanice, yes. Shanice is
Edward.
okay. Who, what, when, and where is that?
Line for speed, oil trading,
Ah, interesting. What do you guys do there?
trade one.
Oh, that's interesting. It's a twist. Usually we just have private bankers, fidelity bankers, social bankers. Dunbar. Oil trading. So I keep track of that. Interesting. Okay, and Sasha?
Right here.
Who's Sasha? Down at the back. Okay, Sasha. Sasha is at gmail.com. Okay, I don't know what that is exactly. Okay. Thank you, Sasha. And then we have Bonnie Lynn. Okay, Bonnie Lynn. And Bonnie Lynn, you work for gmail.com. Yes. And gmail.com is appropriate if you work for places like Flowers and you don't want any of the regulatory issues to be correlated to any other correlations that might be correlated to any other correlations.
Get them in the glasses too.
Yes, indeed. Okay, things have changed in the 21st century. Cindy.
Yeah.
Yeah, Cindy's right over there. Santander Bank and Trust. We have to establish habla español. Every time they put in an ad, they say you have to speak Spanish fluently.
Yeah.
No, if you say good morning, buenos días, ¿cómo está usted? Well, ¿cómo su día hoy? Things like that. ¿Dónde está su cuenta? If you can say things that are normal and natural and typical, yeah, it's enough. But if you read an ad,
Watching you Spanish.
yeah, not only that, that's not good enough anymore. You have to know it fluently. So you can say, God, I can't apply for that again. Because you know some. And you know it enough to function, but you feel like you're not capable when you see fluently. So fluently is like to get,
Yeah.
what do I know, gmail.com. Alright. Estina?
Right here.
Estina. Okay, Estina. Well, we're talking about regulations and compliance risks, and without any aspirations on Estina, she works for?
Bank of the Bahamas.
I didn't want to say it. How are things these days in Bank of the Bahamas?
Things are great.
I like that. Things are great. She didn't back up, she didn't pause, she didn't act like she was shocked, nothing. Things are great. If you have money, maybe put up a deposit on Monday. Don't worry about all that stuff you hear in the news. That's hearsay. Gmail.com. Okay, Lakeisha. Did I say that properly, Lakeisha?
yeah.
Okay, Lakeisha, at the Central Bank. Jeez, be careful what I say now. Regulators in their own. What part of the Central Bank? Supervision?
Yes.
Did I say I was a private banker and he just moved that? Okay, Calvin. Yes. Monique. Yes, Monique. Scotiabanker, indeed. Siobhan. Another central banker. Bank supervision again? What did I do to this session today?
Hey, hey, you considering moving back altogether?
Yeah. I have to figure out some things I was going to say on this team. Okay, and last but not least, this is Natalie.
Yes.
Okay, Natalie. Bank supervision as well?
Yes.
I'm an accountant at the moment. Okay, thank you very much. Bunch of regulators in a row. And this is the year when the central bank is going out to do what? Inspections everywhere. Did I put the name of the bank I work for? No, thank God. Alright. So that some summary of important terms. Let me first of all say that principles-based regulations are really just designed for us to do those things that we know are right. I know it seems simple in principle, but it's not as easy as it seems. Okay? The point is, if you notice, it says that these kinds of regulations are designed to get us away from prescriptive rules. We know what a prescription is, don't we? When we go to a doctor, and he or she, say he or she now. In the old days when we say he, it meant everybody. Now you have to say she. You don't say that, then they don't come to you. Okay? But when a doctor gives a prescription, it's specific to whatever that medication is. When you go to the pharmacist, you cannot tell the pharmacist to add anything, take anything away, bring anything else on, give a preference, or otherwise suggest anything. That's what prescriptions are all about. That's what rules are all about. Principles are not like that. Okay? Principles are a little different because they tend to be broadly stated as opposed to very, very restricted. Absolutely. And so the one just never cease. Oh man, what am I gonna see next? Before I die. Alright. So it's designed to be broad-based. Now, the FSA, who are they again? And where are they located?
UK.
In the UK. These guys have decided that they'll give us some kind of feedback on what they mean by principles-based regulation. By the way, there's a shortened term for that in case you run into it. It's called PBR. So if you see that kicking in somewhere, that's what it means. Principles-based regulations. Alright, whether it's in my sessions, in your notes, or in your test. What kind of test are you having, by the way? Open book, closed book? Open. And you schedule to write your exam when? September. Okay. So the idea is you have to stay on top of your reading so that you don't get too far behind. Because I always tell my students, even if you do a little bit at a time, people I lecture, always do a little bit at a time so that you're not sitting in the 9th hour cursing God, all the lecturers who taught before, the institute, your job, children, everybody. Because that's how it feels if you're doing it in the 9th hour. Okay? So do a little bit at a time. Alright, so FSA says that principle-based regulations, one, has to do with a broad-based set of standards over detailed rules. So we can see right away, first of all, people don't like rules, do we? By nature, we don't like rules. We don't like principles either. But we have to do one or the other, and eventually it'll be some strange combination of both. Alright, secondly, this PBR has to be based, they say, on something called outcomes-based regulations. And what that means is, we follow a certain set of principles and we have a certain expectation as to the outcome. In other words, if we follow a principle in this organization of not lying to each other, we can expect that the outcome will be what?
Honesty.
Honesty.
Yes, a culture of honesty. That's how principle-based rules work. However, if you don't have that kind of environment in this principle, then you have to set a set of rules on how to tell the truth. Imagine that. The rules for telling this truth in the organization are. What do you think the first rule might be if you were to do such a thing? The rules for telling the truth. It requires some. Don't lie. That's a good start. But remember, a rule can never be that simple. A rule always needs to have more and more and more to make your life what? Miserable by prescription. So yes, we have don't lie, then we have to have some sub stuff. Lying means not telling the truth. It also means that if you lie, there will be consequences. The first lie will be a salary cut. The second lie will be a letter of warning. The third lie will be a suspension without pay. The fourth lie, see what I mean? Until you get to whatever. And then finally the seventh lie, you're out. Doesn't matter the nature of the lie. A lie is a lie. Doesn't matter if it's a white lie, black lie, green lie. And so it gets very complicated when we start messing with the rules. Alright, and then number 3, under PBR, they're saying senior management will be expected to come up with the outcome, which means simply this. If we're operating on a set of principles, that basically those persons who are responsible for the organization, whatever organization it is, they are required to follow a certain set of principles that will come up with an outcome that we expect, a culture of honesty, a culture of compliance, this kind of stuff, and that we can expect certain outcomes from them, and as a result, they will be held liable. We know that you're held liable for rules too. But again, this is supposed to be an environment where you can lay back a little bit, follow some moral standards, some stuff you learned as a child, this kind of, and not have to be tied up with a whole bunch of rules. Anybody's worked in an organization with a whole bunch of rules? Yes. How does that feel?
I'm in compliance, so I love it. It's the other people that don't.
Oh, she loves it. Why do you think they don't like it? From your experience, like, why don't they like it?
I think a lot of times it's cumbersome.
Yeah, it's cumbersome. They have to account for a lot of bits and pieces. Yeah, they have to fill in a lot of blank spaces, fill in reports, answer questions. Monthly reports, quarterly reports, people walking in unexpectedly, grading them, telling them stuff, threatening jobs. We don't like it. Now, the rules-based approach, as we know, takes a different approach. We are told that it relies on what? Detailed, prescriptive rules and regulations. There is no tolerance for or vague standards. That's how rules-based people look at principles. We don't need to be making vague statements. We need to write down every single thing that people will know clearly what the deal is. And remember, I'm just looking at some definitions at the moment, because we're going to see some more of this in a little bit. Okay? Regulations, by definition, does what? Brings into conformity rules and interesting, both together. And so regulations and regulators seek to shape and influence the direction in which things should go in terms of trying to do the right thing, in terms of getting organizations to create this culture environment where things are good, clean, honest, and full of integrity. And ironically, a paradox, which happens to be kind of antithesis of the whole thing, the opposite, but not the opposite. Notice what we say about a paradox. It is an argument that does what? Produces an? But typically within what? How is that possible? But that's what a paradox is. So whenever somebody talks about a paradox, it's something that's inconsistent, but it seems to be logical or even commonsensical. Right? It is a statement that is what? Seemingly or opposed to, and yet is perhaps true. That's interesting. So a paradox is clearly, let me put it in space of private mind, a gray area. Okay? That's what it is. Some people think that private banking is a gray area and just put PB in private banking. Again. Okay. Alright. So a paradox is an interesting situation. And we're going to see how rules-based and principle-based issues can end up appearing to be something of a paradox. Because at the end of the day, we're going to wonder which one is better than the other, which one should we go with, or in fact, should we have a combination of both? That will be determined ultimately by the organizations and the individuals who run them. Ask you a question. Should a church be governed by compliance issues, since it's not a financial organization generally?
Yes.
Yes.
Why? A church.
People's money involved.
People's money. Okay, yes. Tithes and offerings. I have heard people recently complaining that they cannot get information from the churches about the financial condition What kind of question is that? Is that rules-based or principles-based? You think? I cannot get information on financial position in my church where I make tithes and offerings.
Principles-based.
For a church, perhaps principles-based, yes. Because remember, the church itself is not governed by any statutory rules to begin with, like financial organizations. So therefore, we can presume that they should be governed by principles-based. If not, if you don't want to call it principles-based, at least what? Moral-based. And theoretically, principles-based issues tend to come out of morally based issues. Exactly. It is wrong to lie in principle because morally lying is wrong. That's how it works. A rule might come up and say lying is fine under these conditions. See what I mean? And that's how it's different. That's why it becomes a paradox ultimately. Because you have an inconsistency that appears logic and non-commonsensical, but maybe it has some truth. Sounds like a pot of soup. But we work in a pot of soup called the world anyway, don't we?
That's all like the situation in the world, just like
Yes. Why would you say? Don't go to your audience name. But why would you say that? I understand exactly what you mean. When you say that, you mean
when I say that, I mean, every organization has their rules and regulations.
Yes.
When an auditor comes in, you may not know what that principle or that rule states word for word.
correct?
So you're not gonna, if they question you, you're gonna tell them, you can tell them part, but not all.
Yeah. Yeah, we're gonna tell them parts, but not all.
You don't wanna get many
You need to tell them what they are.
Yeah.
You tell them
Don't
what they
give
are.
Yeah.
If you give them more, it's gonna provoke more questions.
Yes. That is interesting because usually, that's a very good point. Because usually, when it comes to company audits, the company does not have a rule or set of rules as to how much you should say and not say. It just seems that people who work in the environment somehow seem to know. It's an unspoken.
It's common sense.
Common sense. Sounds like a principle to
It's
me.
actually written in some companies.
Sorry?
It's actually written in some companies.
But what you should say? To auditors?
The level.
That's interesting. What would be an example of one thing that the rule would say you should say?
The rule could possibly say that anything above your direct day-to-day should be referred to your line manager.
Okay. Okay. That's a nice rule. Except for the auditors suggesting something else, then we wouldn't say something else we should say. Like, there were 3 occasions when I didn't follow that rule. We wouldn't say that part of it. Even though we what? We should say it. Because if we say there were 3 times, the auditors say what? What 3 times was that? When did that occur? Do you have evidence when it occurred? Do you know that's an infraction? So we don't say that part. We only say the part that is written. But the part that is unwritten, that we should say, theoretically, no, we don't say that. Hell no. Because then they're going to start digging.
There's a certain outcome or, okay, this organizational culture, this is the way we do things, right?
Yes.
There are specific guidelines as to what steps should be taken to achieve a certain objective.
Yes.
But under certain organizations, you achieve that objective, but there are some things called work simp in the process. So you don't see that line for line
No.
step in the process, and then when the auditor comes in, you achieve the objective, right? And then
Yes.
the auditor questions, you will, how did this happen, you know? And they don't see that step by step,
Hell no.
you know, so.
No, because that step by step has some stuff in it that we don't want to get into. And the reason why I say we don't want to get into is because the step by step is unique to every single organization. Yeah. Very interesting. I'll give you an example. The organization that I work for, there was a question of benefits. Now, benefits are supposed to be documented where? Yeah, the HR manual. Is that a document that is only unique to some people in the organization, not others?
No.
But we know that everybody does not have access, even though you do. Isn't that a paradox? Yeah, it's a paradox. We all have access, but try and get access, depending on who you work for. Somebody will ask you, why do you want to see it? Depending on who you work for. Well, I want to see it because I have a right. How could you have a right and you just got here 2 years ago? They may not say 2 years ago, they may say something that suggests 2 years ago. You follow? And all of a sudden things are getting great. Well, I thought it was okay. I know you thought so. See?
But,
And depend, again, of course. I know you thought so. But doesn't the manual say that in compliance mind operation that is okay? Yes. So I should be able to see it then. Why do you want to see it? Johnny?
come lately.
Yeah, and so you get all these things, and after a while you start thinking, damn, I better leave this alone before there's some repercussion. And should you be worried about repercussion? No, because the policy is clear. Everybody has access to the HR manual. It's not supposed to be a secret. So I write HR International and say, I would like to confirm this position in the HR manual. I have not gotten an answer yet.
That's just an agent.
That's interesting. Why haven't I gotten an answer yet? And that was 2 weeks ago. This is the parent company now. I'm here in the Bahamas. I'm writing the parent company inquiring about an HR benefit. Is that principles based or rules based? It's none of the above. That's what I'm saying. It's a paradox. See this question? If it's a manual benefit, the answer should be able to come back in 1 hour or less. And if there is a benefit, the answer should be what? Yes. If there is none, the answer should be? Isn't that simple enough? And if it's yes, the answer should be, it's this, and this. But it doesn't work that way all the time. And you find that if you try to pursue it,
It's complicated.
yes! So I'm pursuing it on principle. That's the first one. You know, so it's complicated. Okay, I'm pursuing it on the rules. The manual says I could. It's still weird. Strange. And that concept permeates organizations all the time. And we don't know when we're going to be a victim of that. It just depends on when stuff goes down. And so I say that simply to say that somewhere between principles and rules, we're always going to be dealing with issues that are gray. I'll never forget, by the way, I'm a former social banker from back, I don't know, since before the First World War or something. But anyway, I'll never forget, I was a young Scotia banker. Young, vibrant, you know, 22, kicking, black hair, fro, slim, studying. I thought, they tell me, come in and get it done. You know, that kind of way? Yeah,
Naive.
sort of, but not entirely. That was part of the problem. I should have acted naive for a while. That's okay, yeah. But the minute you start showing you know what's going on too soon, it's like the foot. Then you end up somewhere between principles and rule-based issues again. Okay? So, there I am, raising questions. Little youngster's been in like a year. And all of a sudden I'm wondering, like, why is everybody looking pissed off at me? Because I already read the manual. I know what the manual says. And so I start asking questions, they're looking at me like, what the hell are you asking that question for? Like, you just got here, Mr. Tinger. And then so they don't answer, and then I write back or raise it again, they're like, then things that get hairy. And remember now, this was way back when, decades ago. Okay? Until it got to a point where I had to go to the manual now. Dog eat your lunch if you go to the manual and quote it to the people who wrote it and tell you you could read it and quote it. See, principles versus rule and that gray area. This me, in good faith, mind you, according to section 2, subsection 3, subsection man, they beat me to death. But it wasn't an open beating like that. No, it was just quiet. When it's time for your annual increase, instead of getting 5%, which they thought was the world, still things up. And you try to get an explanation, just say, well, that's it. If you try to get an explanation, it's, Mr. Wilkinson, don't you? That's it. And then if you write a rebuttal and say, these are the reasons why that is inappropriate, dog eat your lunch again. Yes. Yes. It's a strange paradox. Here's that word. Indeed. And we're all going to be faced with it at some point. And trying to figure out how to deal with it would be perhaps one of our greatest professional challenges. I have a son who's looking for work now, and one day he'll find a job. And I'm thinking, what the hell do I tell him? Do you operate from a principles-based son? Or do you operate from a rules-based? But you simply operate from what is right. Because he's going to have a dilemma, like a whole lot of other people. Because sometimes when you take a position, you get beat to death. Unless you learn how to go with the. Okay. That's some food for thought. I thought it was an age-old problem, but it's still very current in the 21st century. With all of our knowledge and skills and technology, those fundamental issues still remain, and we're still being governed by them. All right. So the Americans came up with Sarbanes-Oxley. And the reason why they came up with it is because, has anybody ever heard about Enron? Yeah, Enron. That company that did all the hanky-panking several years ago. People lost their pensions, lost their jobs, lost their everything. Audit firm closed down. It was a mess. So because of companies like Enron, the Americans, these two guys, Sarbanes and Oxley, put through this act that says, you know what? So Paul and Tom Jones. They said, we need to find a way so that we don't have this Enron thing too often, if at all. And I say if at all because sometimes no matter what we do, stuff happens. Okay? But we're going to try and minimize this Enron thing. We're going to put some shackles on organizations so that what? They will disclose more information and more honestly. Now, mind you, before this act, it was an understood principle that disclosures ought to be what? Fair and accurate and correct. But human nature being what it is, caused these guys to do what they did, and now we end up with a set of rules again. Okay. So what is the intent of the act? To protect us, see? The investors. Do we have any protection from Cable Bahamas? In the Bahamas? This is the US, but we have equivalent situations here. Do you have any protection from Cable Bahamas if we invest in their shares? Do we know that everything they tell us is the truth?
They have to report.
They have to report. So did Enron. They reported the hell out of stuff. Yes, and they had an independent audit firm that was 80 years old that went down in flames as a result because they lost all credibility. And that's another word. Do we dare call a firm in the Bahamas unethical? Is that a word we can use possibly without being smeared as... Are all our audit firms here ethical? In the Bahamas?
We hope so.
Arthur Anderson and Co. was a very reputable firm. They were in business for over 80 years. Over 80 octogenarians. Folks, not 20, 80 plus. But these guys conducted audits for years and never disclosed the fact that Enron had shell companies tucked away with bad loans sitting in them, hiding them. That Enron falsely inflated their sales value by tens of millions of dollars that never occurred. That Enron stated expenses that were supposed to reduce net income on their financial statement as assets in order to boost the value of their balance sheets. Well, somebody thought that Arthur Anderson and Co. ought to have seen something, but they never disclosed it for whatever reason. Could the reason have been what? That they were buddies? Maybe, I don't know, buddies. Money? Probably money. Because Enron was one of the largest companies in the world, worth tens of billions of dollars. It exists no more. People lost their lives, pensions, because of investments that were made in Enron. And when Enron went down in flames because of what? Improper disclosure by its management and its auditors. There were untold suicides when people discovered that their pensions were gone after working 40 years. Their $200,000, $300,000, whatever, $100,000 they had for their lives. They said, you know what? My pension is gone, I might as well be dead. And some committed suicide. That's how serious the issue is. And it's difficult to actually put that in perspective until we have our own experiences. Okay? But if you talk to some people who suffered under these kinds of programs, you can see why such an act became necessary. Okay? So it's designed to protect investors so that corporations can say more about what's going on, say more of the truth, hopefully, and say it in a way that people can understand. It's the other thing. Because I can assure you, I can disclose some things to you on a piece of paper, disclose it to hell, but you'll have no idea what I'm talking about. Did you know that? But you cannot accuse something like that gray area. But you cannot accuse me of not disclosing. I'm saying, there it is. Read it. And I'll be like this, probably look down, I'm sick, geez, I don't know what the hell it is. Then you take it to somebody you should know, like an accountant. What does that mean? So, well, I understand some of it, but I don't know that other thing. That's a loose end that doesn't explain anything much. It's nothing. See what I mean? You need to go back to the management of the firm and ask them what it means. And dog eat your lunch there. So yes, you can have disclosures, but if it's disclosed in a way that people cannot understand or get an understanding, then it defeats the purpose. So you have a rule, you follow the rule. See that thing? You follow the rule. But inside the rule that you follow, there's some things that are not disclosed. And in this case, it's stuff that you don't understand. Wow. Wow. Then the Act created new standards for corporate accountabilities and penalties for wrongdoing. Something they didn't have before. When these guys did this stuff before, they got away with murder. So you lost your money fine. Investments failed. Companies failed. Management make improper decisions. Hey, it's not our fault. That's how it happens in the market. So this act was designed not only to increase disclosures, but also for greater accountability. And they say to the boards now, just like the corporate governance program, look, if these things go astray, we're holding you guys liable. You're not walking off into the sunset anymore with billions of dollars in bonuses, money, no. You have to answer. And if you're not happy with your answer, we're sending you to finally. Because white collar crime was a thing that didn't have good jail penalties until recently.
Yeah, even in jail today, still like going up golf club.
I agree. So there's more work to do. Alright? And I'm sure in time, and maybe they haven't made it any more severe because a lot of them will be what? Subject to the penalty. Because a lot of these guys who make the laws, many of them are sitting on
Same boys.
yes,
Granted.
which is a conflict. And somewhere later we're going to talk about what we call this a conflict of interest. just like boards in the Bahamas. Every board in the Bahamas, we all can pretty much predict who they will be to some extent. And so we wonder, why is it that boards in the Bahamas don't seek out other Bahamian professionals who have the ability to sit on the board and help to independently guide it to where it needs to go? The problem with boards is that boards seem to only select people who they know. And if they don't know you, then you become suspect because I don't know what you're going to do. And when we make your boy decisions or Miguel decisions, whatever, or our little gang decisions, we don't need anybody who will stand up and say, yes, we must all be like-minded. Which is one of the reasons why we have difficulty in the world and in the Bahamas moving on to getting things done. Because like-mindedness by all leads us to less progress.
I think it's interesting that large corporations, financial institutions, all of that, they have whistleblower policies.
Yes. Whistleblower policies.
Whistleblower policies,
Yeah. In the United States and other big countries, you can probably get away with a little whistleblowing, blah, blah, blah. Unfortunately, in countries as small as the Bahamas and the Caribbean and so on, it's a little more tricky
Yeah.
when you blow the whistle. You have to be
Another country
careful.
to live in.
Yes.
That's right.
Because it's even difficult to remain anonymous.
Right.
If the punch doesn't get you, Tingham will. It's kind of, yes, indeed. Okay. So it's an interesting thing. But at least it's an effort to work towards what? Trying to get something done. Something that was not in place before. In the Bahamas, we really still do have a ways to go. We have our stuff going on, our AML stuff, our compliance, and that's good. We're on the way as well. But there's a lot more work to be done. Wow. So Enron will, these guys, they misrepresented and covered up questionable financial information, lied about it, didn't answer. When they answered, they didn't tell the truth. And shareholders lost, and employees lost, and everybody lost because these companies are no more. And if they were little small companies, you'd say, hey, fine, maybe. But these guys were major players in the worldwide economy because they had business that touched the whole globe. That's how serious that was. Okay? So, who was impacted by the act? Public companies in the United States. You know the difference between a public and private company? Okay? So public companies in the United States. I don't know. Maybe too many of the private companies have. A lot of these guys do. It's like in the Bahamas. Somebody was complaining the other day that Parliament is full of lawyers. Then maybe there should be a greater cross-section of people. Well, maybe there'll be a greater cross-section of people if persons who are in the private sector can have a law passed that says if I run for Parliament and lose, I can go back to my job, and if I win, then I can go on. But we don't have such a law. And who's going to make that law?
Yeah.
Lawyers? Well, if more lawyers make the law, then what's going to happen to the composition in Parliament of lawyers? It's going to. And then all of a sudden, the board-like thing will shift. I don't know when I said that. But that's kind of like what we're talking about. Okay? Very real stuff. So public companies are affected. International companies are impacted. Okay? And last but not least, accounting and audit firms are impacted by this act. And the reason why audit firms are impacted, because audit firms have come under question in recent years about whether they're conducting their audits fairly and what? Equitably. And God forbid the I word. Yes, independently. That's the big kicker. That's the big question. Some food for thought. All right. In the UK, Financial Services Act passed their law in 2000, kind of similar. In this case, there's the power to regulate people and firms. Notice under Sarbanes, we just talked about what? Public companies, international companies, and auditing firms. In the UK, they've included people, individuals. So they took the neck, did like this. All you bastards who are applying to be unethical and not engage in good governance, we want to cover everybody. And look who's under the net. Financial markets such as banking. No accident, banking is first, because banking is that big old monster that leads the charge in terms of this situation. Insurance companies, nonetheless, they're sitting quietly. Does that mean that insurance companies are honest and ethical? No. Do we have a regulator for insurance in the Bahamas?
Insurance commission.
Yes, the commission. And so since we have the commission, folks have asked the question, since we have a commission, where were they when Tito was kicking? Anyway, that's all I'm gonna say about that. But I have to say that because insurance is under the net. By the way, insurance in the Bahamas is huge business. We think about banking because banking is the second pillar behind the monster of tourism. But insurance in the Bahamas is huge. And quiet considering how big it is. Look at it, like walking like this. While banks and other financial institutions are taking a little. But that's interesting. But the UK people did not forget to include them because they know how significant they are in the market of financial services. Those persons in asset management, capital markets. What are capital markets? Places where what occurs? Trading. Equity and bonds and swaps and ETFs and RFQs and QRSs. Big. And finally, mortgages. Are mortgages big in the Bahamas? Huge. Mortgage business in the Bahamas is huge as well. Okay. So basically, under the FSA, these guys are trying to cover everything. And notice, what is their objective? First of all, to bring confidence back to the what? Because after 2008, all confidence was lost. Okay? When the real estate market crashed in the United States, it had an impact on the entire world because those collateral-backed mortgage loans, see? That these guys packaged and repackaged and sent out as investments around the world. There were tens of millions of dollars in investments worldwide backed by mortgages, commercial and residential. And so when the mortgage market started, the market started to drop, then what happens? These investment packages lost their value. People lost their money. Because folks thought that the real estate market would boom and indefinitely. Nobody thought that there would be such a radical decline back in 2008. And we don't have all the information yet on what caused such a radical decline in the real estate market. Did it just burst? Or were there some little steps in between that caused it to burst? Either way, the whole world suffered. Did the Bahamas suffer? Like hell we did. We are just now beginning to feel a little relief. Okay. Some of those persons that were released from banks and other places in the Bahamas, recently even, some of that is part of the effect of that 2008 situation. Because these organizations are now trying to recoup and reset and get ready now for the new wave post the recession. Serious stuff. Number 3. Security appropriate, okay? This issue about protecting consumers is becoming more and more important because of Enron and Tyco and all these places that went down and people lost everything. In the Bahamas, I've heard that the government is talking about a Consumer Protection Act. Have you heard about that? What do you think that act is designed to do? Is it designed to protect consumers? It's supposed to be. Yeah. Did they say when it's going to happen? Soon. When it's soon, we don't know. But hopefully it's designed so that persons who have a gripe in the consumer market can go to somebody and get some kind of relief. At the moment, we don't have such a situation. And then finally, it was designed to do what? Sorry? Reduce the what? To which it is possible for? Interesting. To do what? The financial crime. Now, folks, let me just say this. You see this point? Because remember, a lot of times we can kind of look at this stuff just academically, like it's part of the CRQ, CRF thing. See? And that's it, when it's over, let's do like that. The hell with it. Or we can just look at it and say, that's the UK, or the US, or Europe, or South America, whatever it is. Truth be told, we are impacted by these things now. So whatever folks are doing, we have to look at it now and say, how does that connect to us? We cannot look at it in isolation anymore. We could, but we do it to our detriment. We have to look at it and say, does any of this stuff impact us? Well, certainly this objective impacts us. And when the web shops become regulated, we're going to have to find a way to make it impossible for regulated web shops, see, just substitute the words, regulated web shops to be used for the purpose connected with
Financial crime.
and many other kinds of crimes. Because once they are regulated, the banks can no longer refuse them. And who says that all the money will be from poor people's paychecks? We don't know. So that's something that is relevant to us and upcoming, not the only thing, but it's certainly the most recent thing. And we need to understand that when they are regulated, it's not going to be simply a case of, hallelujah, the government is finally going to get some more money in its coffers. It's not as simple as that. More food for thought. Okay. So we're in the middle of it. Alright, so rules-based regulation based on a set of detailed rules, we know that governs a firm's behavior. Okay? It's an issue of compliance. This is what we expect you to do, go ahead and do that. We are told that such rules enables firm to do what? Yeah. Did you get a passport copy? Yes. Did you get a what?
Verification of
Yeah,
address.
verification of address. Yes. Did you get a second piece of ID? Damn right I got it. Take it again. Did you? And so on. That's what the rules-based thing is. Now, this ticking of the box is supposed to guarantee compliance with law. Does it?
No.
Not entirely. Only to some extent. Because some people are actually ticking and they don't even have the stuff they're ticking. I don't know who's bold enough to do that anymore, but you never know. It's just like when you're working a delinquent account. You get tired working an account, you just write something on it. Call customer, they're not there. The hell is I'm tired. Or
And then when central bank come in, all their reviews.
No,
of course.
you demonstrated, you go on, Nicholas wasn't there. There's no evidence.
Yeah.
There's no evidence to the contrary.
Number way out. Check the call log.
Yeah, depending on the situation, you
It-
either
it
get caught or get away. See what I yeah. Depending on the situation, that's a simple case that you might get away with
Yeah.
if maybe your supervisor doesn't get suspicious. You follow? So your supervisor gets suspicious, you have a target of 30 and 22 say call no contact.
Yeah.
Say, man, Susie, you might use my job, but you got to be joking.
Pick up the phone
Or
on yourself.
if Susie is really their job, they'll see it and say, good, try better next time. Now you, in Jana, you need to do something about that, but not my,
Susie,
no way. Is that principle?
and Susie, yeah, exceed the expectation for.
Exceed!
Exceed the expectation for.
Again.
So you can see that principles and rules extend their tentacles in all kinds of interesting places, such that we find ourselves raising the questions, is this principally based, rule based, or some other thing in between based? And the same thing that we do with corporations and entities and whatever, it's the same principle. How could they get exceeding? And I got needs improvement. Well, because I wanted to get the 7, that's one thing, and you, I hate you. And when people hate you, no matter how hard you work, it stings. Is that unethical? Yes. Is that principle based? Yes. It is morally wrong. Is it rules based? Yes. The rules allow you to get away with it because you are a supervisor or a manager who is governed by the rules of the organization that allows you to do it. Okay.
Within your discretion.
Yes, within the discretion. Yes. All right. So, does ticking guarantee the compliance? Yes and no. So you can see right away, we're gonna have a whole lot of yes, 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 no, 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 yes and no, and yes and no. By the time we finish the session, it's gonna still be yes, no, and maybe so. The point is, you get an opportunity to actually look at it and mess with it a little bit like, oh my God. I always had a feeling it was something now I can call it a name. I see it a little clearer now because I see some information that makes it clearer. I don't like it. Tomorrow I'm going to change something. Is that a good idea? To change, go in on Monday and change something? It's ethical, but it's not. No. And that's the first there again, paradox. Alright? On the principle side, we refer to a what? Broad set. Standards. What's right? What's moral? Okay, what's the general direction to go into? Nobody's telling you A, B, C, D, E where to go, but basically we know from our backgrounds, from our history, from our knowledge and information, from the culture, whatever it is, which way to go. And culture has a lot to do with principles-based behavior, doesn't it? Absolutely. Serious stuff. Now notice, under principles-based, they tell us these standards may be accompanied by what? Guidelines, but not rules. There's a difference, by the way. Guidelines are not the same as rules. Yes, guidelines are principles-based and they tend to be more flexible. Allows you some room. Yes. Except for many organizations, they give you a set of guidelines, but they want you to deal with them as if they're rules. Because if you deviate and say you were just being a little more flexible, then they might give you a hard time depending on what it is. So, but aren't they just guidelines? Don't they have the right to biggle? You can biggle, but not without mine. Of course, approval. You approve for everything. I give the approvals. You don't think. Speaking about don't think in terms of guidelines, I understand now that loan departments in the Bahamas in certain banks, you go in and somebody takes an application online, and then after that, the loan officer in the Bahamas has no jurisdiction. which means that you're a glorified. Let me not say it.
Yeah.
Anyway. You take an application online, after which the loan officer in the Bahamas has no jurisdiction. What kind of loan officer is that? Yeah. Taking information. Even with, no, even now the delinquency, they tell me is going to Tim, Bob, whoever that is, in Africa somewhere. To make decisions about delinquent customers here. Is that rules-based or principle-based? No. It's a gray area thing. Yeah, gray. It's a financial decision, how's that? The hell with rules, principle, it's a financial decision. And that's what organizations do when they don't want to get into rules-based, principle-based, and starting answering questions. It's look, it's a financial decision. We are a profit and oriented company. It's a financial decision. The board has. So shut the hell up, boy. But we don't put you on the next list. Sick. Spooky.
When you have all this international cross-border, all these things in different jurisdictions, that's my dealings.
Yeah.
But I mean, as a consumer, that's what they're gonna say, but this my name, this my loan. And every time they can hurry, who I don't know, all kind of countries that I never been to, looking at my stuff.
And making decisions about your outcome and your future and your life and your assets and your everything.
The bank is going to tell you that's their money. You want it, you do as we say, go someplace else.
Yeah, get the hell out.
That's how it's you,
That's unfortunately where we are.
That is the attitude.
And that's where we're going to be, ultimately. And while I'm sorry for the younger people in this room, your children, my children, that's what it's going to be. Gone are the days when somebody could walk into a bank and speak to a bona fide, trained and experienced loan officer with knowledge of the culture, the people in the environment, and make a decision that will govern the person and the organization in the long run. Those days are gone. You are now a statistic, you're a number. If you don't follow the outcome of that calculation, then
Find another place to borrow some money from.
they're all going to be the same. Just like everywhere you go, the price is the same. They all agree. So there's nowhere to go.
The Starbucks don't even know that their loans being transferred somewhere else.
They tell you, I mean,
And the fine print, they tell you if they sell it to
but
someone else.
up front, especially the Canadian banks, they tell you, this has to go to head office for approval,
And where is that office again?
wherever they are.
Wherever it is,
head
there, Angel. Absolutely. But I'll tell you, back in the day, they had a head office too. We still had head offices for loans that were above a certain limit. But for car loans, $250,000 mortgage, stuff that we could still do here. Local management can make decisions on those things. It's only when the loan got up to $500,000, $1 million more, that we had to refer to head office. And we referred it with our recommendations. I fought many, but because when I would do a mortgage, and they would say, "Oh, the mortgage is declined." Well, I was not a good one. Because I was adventurous in those days. You're young and you're ready to go. I got this. This is me working late. Yes, sir. That was 9 o'clock at night. Point 1. This is the reason why this should be done. 2, we should take further collateral. 3, I don't agree that should be done. Perhaps we should consider this thing. 4, they probably didn't like that all the time. But I would do that until they finally said, okay, fine, do it on this condition, do it. But we had the option to do that. It's not that way anymore. Okay? Jeez. And our qualified Bahamians are just qualifying application. Take your time. Let's take your time. Where you live? Have any collateral? How much? 10,000 anymore? Enter. Don't call us, we'll call you. or something. Alright. So within all this principles, rules based thing, we have reality as well. And the reality is not only in the FSA UK, the Sarbanes Oxley Act US. The Brazilian economy is finally decided that they will pass an anti-bribery law finally, and all this stuff. The African countries and the European countries, all kinds of stuff going on. Now we're in it. And we can't talk about we're in it, we're in it. And we're feeling it more and more every single day. Okay? Our lives are changing by the reality of the world. I understand that we were trying to build some agricultural thing in Andros somewhere. And somebody had the audacity to say that the world something or the I something. Raise some question. Hello? This lady's in the room. Oh, she heard it too. That we're not happy with that because that means the government is going to be subsidizing agriculture. And we can't have that in the world marketplace. Well, we're not worried about the world marketplace yet. We're just worried about whether we can produce enough potatoes so we don't drop dead when the world prices go.
But you're not. Think about it.
That's the bottom
That's the
line.
reality. You're not. Two, three people make decisions and you see just how sovereign you are.
Take it back.
So should we sneak and do that?
Take it back. Take it back.
Our sovereignty? We can't. We already stuck. But maybe we can sneak and do it when they find out tell me here.
Do you think Cuba
The violent people
is
stupid, we don't understand.
Cuba is more sovereign than us?
Yes.
They sure are.
So if they can do it, why can't we?
Because if we become sovereign, then we suffer the same fate that they are suffering. That's what happens.
You can't be
They
sovereign.
cut you off.
You can't be sovereign when 80% of your people coming from one country. You ain't sovereign.
They can still say, get the hell out. We can't say that anymore. Because we say, get the hell out, there's come up one corresponding bank operation will be down.
That's it.
Yeah. Stop.
So we blame our forefathers.
That's another thing. Is sovereignty principle-based, rule-based, or is it gray?
Great. Very great.
The problem with the Bahamas is we're so small, we're such an open economy, we're subject to everybody's women bigger. That's the problem. It's just that whenever we get an opportunity, we should have this Andros, ain't nobody going on just to look at them. Build it to hell anyway. And sneak the potatoes to Nassau or whatever. That's it. I understand all that. And then when they call us at the base, whoever the Prime Minister said, the Prime Minister of the Bahamas, we have questions for you. So if we go to the mic like,
Make it wrong, everybody could just have a little fun in the back of their yard.
sure, but I'm just saying, we can do that. They don't have a problem with that. Farm in your yard. It's the Andros thing. Because the Andros thing means that you can make your own potatoes. Then when you start making enough potatoes, then we don't have to what? Import it. Then you say, what is this work? We need to make some of our own, then some of our own. And then the more of your own you get, the less reliance you have. And the less reliance you have,
That's how it is.
we can't have that. Because remember, it's going to one day be a one world thing. We tell from a central area what everybody does. If you don't like it,
Stop it.
all right. So what is the reality with this principles versus rules-based situation? Well, first of all, the principle-based rules kind of emanated from what we call common law. Have you ever heard that expression? Common law means what? Does anybody know? Where the rules are made from legal decisions in the courts over hundreds and hundreds of years called precedents. Some people call it precedents. Okay? Same thing. That's what common law is about. This is kind of how principles evolve. Okay? If you're a Christian, you shouldn't wear mini or makeup. Of course, that has changed now. Christians wear minis and makeup. I'm Christian, but I'm human. I'll wear mini if I feel like it. So things are changing. But the point is, that's where these things emanate from. The interesting thing about common law is that it's compiled of what? Principles and rules. one kicks in, the other kicks in depending on the situation. Alright, so North America, the Western world, Canada, US, Caribbean, UK, West Germany, these places, they're governed by common law, which are principles based primarily and some rules thrown in recent decades, centuries. Civil law, on the other hand, is strictly rules based. Okay? European countries are governed by civil law. South American countries are governed by civil law. Many African countries are governed by civil law. Asian countries, I don't know what the hell, I guess it's civil too. Really sure. What the hell goes on in Asian countries other than Japan? Because Japan is considered a what now? A Western nation.
Singapore is also
Yes.
in between.
Yeah, Singapore is a hybrid, yes. As opposed to the other Asian countries like Hong Kong maybe. Because Hong Kong was British for 100 years and all that crap. So they're not influenced by the British system. Alright? So we have these realities, both of which govern whether we're operating from a principles base, or rules base, or now some combination of the two. And I tell you, at some point in the argument, we're going to get to somewhere between the two. Now, another moment on Sarbanes-Oxley. A lot of people feel that this rules-based structure is too what? Which it is. If you read the act, notwithstanding the what? The intent. It is too murky and difficult to understand, which is one of the reasons why a lot of rules don't work, because they become complex, like tax laws. If you don't believe me, read the United States tax law, which is the most complicated in the world. Read the Canadian tax law, read the South American tax laws, and you'll find out exactly how this rules-based structure can be what? Hopelessly and
Gotta read the 100 pages first.
and then after you read them, then you have to read them again. Then after you read them, then you have to read them again. And then after numerous readings, then you have just kind of try and figure out where do I need to go to solve the current problem that I have, because I'm trying to mess with anything else. And maybe that's what they're hoping, you don't have time, just go and then let it rip. But look, politicians are politicians, despite all that stuff coming from people about what? The act, and how complex and murky it is. This dude, Henry, what did Henry say? Said this act has served the Bahamas? Sorry, the US? Well, and it is necessary for its growth and prosperity. These rules. Do you agree with him or not? Maybe to some extent. Because we can't leave everything to the principle-based view of boards. Because remember, a lot of boards are just what? A gang. Yeah, a gang of people all who know each other, they drink together, go on vacations together, they entertain families, each other, whatever they do. I don't know. And so if you're not a part of that circular situation, and you try to get a board appointment, you might find that it's not as simple as you think, no matter that you're qualified to do it. Because oftentimes it's not just a function of your fundamental qualifications and your extended experience in a particular area. So Paul says it's good for the US. Would it be good for the Bahamas? Some people feel so. Because after 2000 we put all kinds of things in place, and so now we can't move. Well, we couldn't move. In fact, we're so grown now that if you don't have 3 pieces of ID saying the same thing, somebody might turn you away. So why do you need 3? I have 2, sir, ma'am. Excuse me. Excuse me. You have that? The policy says 3. And if you don't have 3, get the hell out. But all 3 say the same thing. Why did you use 2? Because. You hear me? Which one is working? I don't know. One of them That's what it is. So yes, we are in it. And we are subject to it every single day going forward. Does it mean it's going to get any easier? Probably not. Wow. So what does Hector say? We know what Paul said on the US side about this rules, principles. What does Hector say? Can somebody read that? You can see it.
What principles-based regulation does mean and should mean is moving away from prescriptive rules to a higher level of articulation of what the FSA expects firms to do.
Yes.
In other words, it helps emphasize that what really matters is not that any particular box has been ticked, but rather that when making decisions, executives know how they will be judged on the consequences, the results of those actions.
So agree to that. Yeah. Okay. Now, the people who make rules don't particularly like this thing by Hector. But this thing by Hector, he's the FSA chief UK, which means that they come up with this common law thing, which evolves from people's experiences, which is a very practical way to apply rules, which is where the principles tend to come from. Okay? Doesn't matter that US is also common law, but because of the nature of the US environment and economy, they seem to prefer more what? Prescriptive measures. Perhaps because of the serious losses and breakdowns and the impact that these things can have not only on the American economy, but the entire world economy. Maybe that's why Paul says that this prescriptive, murky, unclear, bloody thing is fine with me. I don't care. Let's go with it. It's good for us. These guys are saying, no, it's not good for us in the UK. We just want people to know that we expect them to do what is right. See what I mean? And that if you don't do what is right, when our auditors come in, who are supposed to be independent, they will fix you. But they're not what? Compromised. Because the auditors are also being held to the same standard. You follow? That's why in the UK, for example, if a parliamentarian does something that we in this part of the world appear to be simple, like they lie about something and the lie is only like $79.33, they resign.
Yeah,
You know? Might be 39 million in this part of the world. We just fix our tie, our skirt. I resign, you gotta be kidding. Should Leslie but I'm saying he's laughing check. Because he was what?
Yes,
Oh, you were joking? So they resign. I just said that because it's so inherently true and so current and so relevant to this very moment. That's what is so incredible about it. It's not like we're talking about some historical account that occurred somewhere when Columbus discovered the New World. And then we leave the Romans and thank God that was just a movie. If only it was just a movie. But it is not. It is a current event. As current as we are in this bloody Rome. Okay. So, Hector says, no, we don't want prescriptions. We want to move to a higher level of articulation. Because we are supposed to be more educated, more evolved now. As human beings. We don't need people to watch everything we do and write a rule for every single thing. We're supposed to be beyond that, says Hector. And to some extent, that's true. Imagine if I had to follow my wife around all day to see what she's up to. That's like rules-based. Gotcha. Imagine what my life would be. That's my point. So I have to operate from a what? Principle base. I have to say to myself, everything is fine with my wife. Whatever she's doing is the correct thing. She might go to work and get something. Yeah, make some. So my wife nor children will what? Starve while I'm worrying about something. And this is what they're saying. We don't need to watch these guys. They know right from wrong. We will deal with them when we go in and things are not in order. And we will deal with them sufficiently. They will be judged on the consequences. So when my baby says, who's 16 now, Daddy, if I do something like whatever, get caught with something in school, what are you gonna do? I said, I'm coming in with my belt in my hand. Is that principles based or prescription? That's principles based. Prescription will be when you go to school, somebody asks you, don't do that. They tell you that, don't say that. They tell you that, no. He already knows what is right, what is wrong. So his conduct will not be based on any rule. It will be based on a violated principle. They coming like this in front of everybody. Absolutely. Dog eat your lunch if it's an assembly morning. I'm walking up past everybody. He said, Daddy, you do that? I said, you're damn right I would. So even if he's thinking about it, when he thinks about the what, he will be judged on the
Consequences.
makes you wonder which one we really need. Alright. So a rule will say, see that? Do not drive faster than they tell you. The principle will say, there's no number there. There's no kilometers, miles, none of that crap in the principle. All the principle says is what? Drive at a speed that is and prudent. And most of us know what that is, don't we? We can't say, don't tell me that. I don't know. I need a number. Hell no. Trust me. When I'm on the highway in the US or whatever country, and I know when I'm going too fast. Even my body knows because it starts to panic. Like my heart starts beating. Like, I'm not. And it's the same place in organizations. We know when we're doing something wrong. Because you get like hot. Like you cheap in $10 for lunch on the trail. Not cheap, they just buried it and put it back the next day for lunch. But even doing that, because you know it's wrong, there's no rule to say but you know it's wrong. So as you're moving it, your heart is racing. It's sick. And sometimes you can't take it. You just put it back and close the drawer. Some of us have nerves that we just yuck it. And we panic until when? The next day. But it's the same principle. You don't have to put a number. By the time I hit 60, my blood pressure starts to go up, my heart starts to race, and my body knows that, you know what? Samuel, you are going too fast. It's an interesting concept. There's no number in principle, but the rules tell you 90. Suppose the rules are wrong. 90 might be what? Too fast. Maybe it should be what? 50? That's interesting. Alright. Look at these guys. Which one do you think is rules based? Yeah, these guys. Look at these guys. Hey man, look, we don't need that stuff. In fact, these two teams are playing football, but what is happening? Yes, football means two different things. Which means that sometimes the principles-based thing can get what? Confusing until you clear it up. Alright? Sorry? Yeah, you kind of, this kind of requires a hybrid of both. Because these guys can't show up with this. These guys show up with this. And aren't we here to play football? And everybody says, yes. And then you have to sort it out. We're here to play either American football or soccer. And I said, oh, why didn't the memo say that? See what I mean? Because we thought what we thought. And sometimes that's where principles basically go over. Because sometimes it leaves people to thinking what they thought. They thought. And so a lot of times, yes, we still can maintain a principles-based denomination, but sometimes we have to be a little prescriptive so we don't have what? This kind of confusion, by all means. Yeah. Interesting. Happens every day, by the way. Alright? So, because the Brits were so serious about their act on principles-based operations, they came up with a lot, 11 principles to guide businesses. I'm sure the Americans are familiar with these principles, and Bahamians should perhaps consider them as well, many of which we are already familiar with. It's not a UK related issue, even though it's their 11 principles, but these things come and cover all of us. We all know that a firm should conduct its business with, which means they should be honest about how they do business. They should be honest about how they disclose information. They should disclose all of the information to the customers. They shouldn't say some and leave some. They shouldn't tell the customer some and then when something happens, say, well, the rest is at the bottom on page 17. Right there. Well, you should have. And we know very well the customer average will not. Even above average customers will not read page 17. No way. Yes. And therefore, that could be deemed to be a lack of, even though it's legal. See what I mean? That's not illegal to put it there and not tell. It's just not good business to put it there knowing people won't read it and not tell. Number 2, business must be conducted with you and by all means. And who's the beneficiary of that? Both the organization and your customers. Except nowadays, sometimes the customer, is the customer still king? No. Does anybody remember when the customer was king? I remember when the customer was king. A million years ago. When I was a young banker, when customers came in, I was like, sort of, yay! I used to have a little plastic suitcase. Anybody know why it was plastic? It was cheaper, yeah. You got it? And I'd load a million loans in that plastic thing. It was screaming like this. Work until 10, then go home and work until 3. So I can have all my loans ready when? For my customers when they come in the next day. So they don't have to what? Wait. We took pride. Mr. Jones, come right this way. Your loan is ready. These are the details of your loan. These are the details of your promissory note, your chattel mortgage, sign here, sign here. These are your copies. If you have any questions, please feel free to call me. And we took pride in that stuff. When customers come and they're sitting too long, we get nervous. You stop something, somebody else gets, hello, excuse me, come, like that. Nowadays, you walk. Customers standing there, waiting around for somebody to say, can I? All right. I guess that has something to do with care and diligence. Number 3, firms must take reasonable steps to what? Organize and control its affairs and make sure that they have adequate risk management systems. Absolutely. All right? And we need that because everybody a firm does businesses that's not honest. And so we're trying to catch not the honest people, but the dishonest ones. Because there are some customers, most of us are driven by principles-based behavior. We try to do what is right. But there is a percentage out there who we need to have this in place for so that they don't bring us down with them. Arthur Anderson probably never thought that Enron would be caught. Never thought that even if Enron was caught, that they would suffer the ultimate fate, which was what? Shut down. They weren't fined. Nobody went to prison. They just shut down because they lost what? All credibility. Simple as that. Principle number 4, firms must maintain what? Adequate financial resources. That means don't take the company's money and play with it. Invested in what? Suspect investments around the world. Even in the Bahamas, where we have pension funds, we have to be careful where we invest those pension funds. Because if we decide to invest them in a company locally that has a connection outside or whatever, and then something goes wrong, then people in the Bahamas can potentially lose their pensions. Even though they tell me that only about 25% of firms have pension plans in the Bahamas. Is that good or bad? Yeah. Do we need legislation to govern that? Like all firms should have a pension plan? And then the company said, how can you tell us what to do? We're going to close down if you try to tell us what to do. No pension or we're gone. Okay. The point I'm making is we are not excluded from this situation that enshrines us in terms of principles and rules. That's my point. Rule number 5, firm must observe proper standards in the market. That is why the Securities Commission of the Bahamas is constantly swerving around, doing inspections of organizations to make sure that whatever investments the firms in the Bahamas are involved in, that they are above board and they will not sully the good reputation of the Bahamas and cause significant losses to its customers. Very important reason for the SCD. Rule number 6, pay due regard to your customers and treat them fairly. I say mother sick because treat them fairly. Can you establish a set of rules to treat customers fairly? You can try, but it's not a good idea. The best way to treat customers properly is from a principles-based perspective. The best way. Because when you do it from a principles perspective, people feel the treatment. If you're doing it from a rules-based, or you attempt to do it, people will feel the rule. And that rules-based thing will feel very mechanical to people. Okay? So, Mr. Fidelity, the only guy in class other than me, you're married, you can tell your wife you love her in 2 ways. From a rules-based. Yeah, I love you. And I yell. As a rule, I'm here. You can use that method. Or you can use a principles-based method and say, I do love you. And I will love you forever. See that? Which one do you think she'll feel more? See, none. That's the gray area. Yeah. Thank you very much for throwing that gray area in there. Because that is also a possibility. Yes, she said none, because talk is cheap. Only money. Well, yeah. That's interesting, that gray area, none. Because none is a relevant issue. None is an issue not to be discarded. None is a real yet unspoken aspect of these things, both personally and in the financial world. Wow, okay. Rule 7. Firms pay due regard to the information needs of its. You notice how customer based this is? Well, this is trying to be. And communicate this information into them in a way which is what? Clear, fair, and we can say that that's kind of conforming with the Sarbanes. That's what they're trying to achieve too. Clear, fair, and not misleading. And why is it that the FSA is trying to do this? Because we have had experiences where companies have not been doing these things around the world. And some of them are not getting better, they're getting worse. That's why a lot of governments have gone from this principles-based thing to a very prescriptive-based, to force companies, see? Force them under fear of what? Fines and imprisonment now. To be what? Clear, fair, and not to be misleading. Wow, that is serious. Alright? Rule number 8, sorry, this numbering thing has gone the other way. But this would be rule number what? 8? Okay. A firm must manage its. If you do not have an independent director on your board, is there a conflict of interest potentially? By all means. Why do you think one of the rules in the Bahamas of compliance and governance is that there must be at least one independent, non-resident, executive director? And we still don't. That's the reason why. And sometimes we still don't do a good job at that. We still yuck Mary and call her an INE, whatever we call her, or him. But really, Mary or John is still part of the all girls club. Yeah. We just call him an INII to satisfy the rules. So you see, the problem with rules is we can still satisfy it and at the same time violate it. Okay. So rule number 8, watch your conflict of interest issues between yourself and your customers, and between your customer and the third party called client. Be careful. Conflict of interest issues tend to bring things into disarray. And we don't find out until the whistle is, or the punch somehow gets the information. Should we get rid of the punch or not? Some people say that everything in the punch is a lie. Is that true? Lie. The truth of the matter is, if it's a lie, then we shouldn't worry. What should we worry about? If it's true. If it's a lie, there's no worry. It's like going to hell. Oh, Mr. Wilkinson, I'm an atheist. I don't believe in hell. It's foolish of you to say that you're afraid to go to hell. I said, yeah, scared, I'm going to hell. It's foolish of you to do that. Suppose there's no hell. Well, my question is simple as his. Suppose there is. If there's no hell, what have I lost? But if there is a hell, mother flip. Especially if it's the hell we know about. That's the scariest thing. It's like education. Even my baby who wanted to, he thought he had a smart question for me because he doesn't like homework. Like most kids. His daddy only nerdy children like homework. He hates homework. He does it. Because remember, he's operating from a principal. But his question was, so Dan, suppose I were to go and get this education that I have to get and finish high school and go to college and all that stuff, and then I die. Wouldn't that be a waste? He just felt so philosophical. It's like the hell question. He said, wouldn't that be a waste, Dad? He figured he had me stumped. Like when they asked Jesus a question, like, he better draw something in the sand. Okay, those who would have lost sense, but they thought they had to stop before that. So he thought he had to stop. So I said, son, I understand your point. But you are not getting an education in the event that you die. You're getting an education in the event that you live. Because if you die, it doesn't matter. You wouldn't even know that you don't have it anymore. But I'll be damned if you live.
Don't have it.
And you can't read or write. And you live. It's a spooky blind. It's like the hell question. So he's like, oh, God, okay, I gotta do this. Alright, rule number 9. A firm must take what? Reasonable care to ensure the? Is that good advice? Yes, because customers what? We still rely on the firm. We still rely on companies that we do business with. We still want to believe every single thing they tell us. Don't we? On average. And so, because of that, the firms have a duty to be what? Clear. And make sure the information is correct. Imagine going into a doctor's office and you're doubtful about whether the doctor will tell you the truth. How spooky is that? And unfortunately, they all don't tell us the truth. Did you know that? They too have to think about what prescriptions they're going to follow. Because some of them are not ethical either. So firms of any kind, large and small, are subject to these issues. Speaking about disclosure, I often wonder when you go to your physician's office and they have a file on you like this. Okay, according to this file, you have blood in your urine, your head, your voice, you're swelling up somewhere else, whatever. And they have all this stuff, but they never give you a copy. So why aren't we entitled to a copy of what's killing us? And if you ask for one, it's just like asking for the manual at work. Well, I am the pharmacy. The doctor, then all of a sudden you get that feeling like, oh my God, I shouldn't have asked that. Next time I come, he's going to give me the wrong needle. Because he's mad. Whatever it is, you panic. But you really should. If it's your information, you should have copies of it. What's the big secret? If it's you,
Something went wrong.
yes,
They went way to the States for a second opinion.
Yes.
So this diagnosed here. And because of this diagnosis, a lot of stuff went wrong, so they decided that they were going to pursue it in court.
yes.
Not knowing,
Not knowing, let's put Sue first. Sue, and that ain't a girl Sue either. Sue.
not knowing that the lawyer that they went to, and just by chance happened to be the spouse of the doctor. One operating under a different name.
Yes. Welcome to the real world.
And they weren't knowing. So, I mean, by the time all the information came out, then it was really a lawsuit.
Yes.
Big one.
Yes. So you see how easily something can start off in a position from what's so simple and turn out to be a nightmare. And even though that stuff can happen in an environment like ours because we're small, that doesn't mean that it only happens in small environments. It happens in larger countries as well, where somebody happens to be connected to somebody. So you go to Lawyer John, who's the brother of Susan, who's in love with Mary, who used to be married to Tom, who is now just like a TV thing. And if your luck is really bad, you get caught in the middle of that stuff. And you either get everything you hope for, or nothing you hope for. You get bamboozled. Who said that? Whoever said that. Alright? Put bait. First must have added protection. Yeah. You know what? I think I'm gonna end on that. I'm out of space. I'm gonna put it here. Put. Yeah. And I'll see you guys next week right here at 10 o'clock.